I cooked the entire Thanksgiving dinner myself. My son stood up and thanked his wife for doing everything. Good thing this time it wasn't this poor guy cooking. So by Christmas, I had made sure the gift deed listed only my friend and neighbor's name. Generational conflicts are inevitable. We old folks tend to think we figured life out, that our experience can help in any situation. But the moment you try to give a young person some advice, they immediately take it as an insult. The only things that can help here are talking and looking for compromises. But if two stubborn donkeys, one young, one old, lock horns, trouble is guaranteed. That's what happened when I advised my son to invest his money in a particular property. Naturally, he didn't want to listen to me. I've spent my entire life working in construction. What could I possibly know about real estate? And yet I do know a thing or two. I bought a house for next to nothing and made $2 million on it. My son found out about this and took offense, but I still decided to give him the house as a Thanksgiving gift. Or rather, it's actually a whole mansion. But after what he said to me, I had the deed rewritten, this time in my best friend and neighbor's name. And at Christmas, I announced it to my son. He had already been counting on the money from selling the mansion, and now he's in serious trouble with his creditors. That's the short version. If you still want to know how a simple piece of advice turned into a war, sit down. I'm 71, and this is the last time I let my own blood treat me like a beggar in a house built with these hands. The turkey smelled like my childhood. Butter, garlic, rosemary. That faint hint of smoke from the old gas oven that never quite kept a steady temperature. I basted the bird with the same spoon I'd used for 30 years, the handle worn smooth where my thumb rested. "Dad, are you sure you don't want help?" My daughter-in-law, Melissa, called from the living room. She sounded polite enough, but I heard the impatience behind it. I always did. "I'm fine," I answered. "This old pauper still remembers how to cook meat without poisoning anyone." I meant it as a joke, though the word pauper tasted bitter even then. Melissa didn't respond. The television murmured from the other room, some football game my son, Eric, had insisted we turn on for background noise. I checked the pies, adjusted the oven temperatures, and stirred the gravy. Every dish on that table was mine. My hands, my recipes, my paycheck from the years when no one asked me if I was tired. I carried the turkey out last. The dining room looked like something from a magazine. Not my doing. Melissa liked everything to match. Napkins, candles, plates, cutlery. All in muted colors she called neutral, and I called funeral. Eric sat at the head of the table, my seat in the old days. He wore a crisp shirt, a watch he couldn't afford, and that permanent expression of mild disappointment he'd perfected since turning 40. Melissa sat to his right, my two grandsons on the sides, and my empty spot at the far end, like I'd wandered in from another family's celebration and been allowed to stay. "Oh, wow," Melissa said when I set the turkey down. "That looks nice." Nice. I glanced at the boys. Liam was 11, already glued to his phone, thumbs moving faster than my eyes could follow. Noah, 8, at least looked at the food with hungry interest. "It smells great, Grandpa," he said. "Did you make the mashed potatoes too?" "Everything you see," I said. And that was true, right down to the cranberry sauce that Melissa used to buy canned but now insisted needed a more authentic touch, which apparently meant I cooked it instead of her. We bowed our heads for grace. Eric mumbled something generic about blessings and opportunities and the wonderful efforts of my wife. "The turkey is from Granddad," Noah added, trying to help. Eric shot him a look. "Right," he said. "Melissa handled everything with the planning, though. Couldn't have done this without you, honey." He lifted his glass toward her. She smiled, a little tight. Everyone clinked glasses, including me, though no one bothered to wait for mine to reach theirs. We ate in relative peace for the first 10 minutes. Compliments floated across the table, most of them angled toward Melissa. "The decor is beautiful. These plates are gorgeous. You really outdid yourself this year. I chewed slowly, listening. My turkey, my stuffing, my gravy, my pies, my kitchen, my old worn-out cookware that Melissa had once called vintage when her friends came over, then embarrassing when she thought I wasn't in the room. Liam pushed aside the green beans. Eat at least some of those, Eric said. Your grandpa made them. With bacon, I added. The way you liked them when you were his age. Eric's eyes flicked to me, then away. Yeah, well, he said. Back then we didn't know any better about cholesterol. He laughed. Melissa laughed. The boys looked confused and copied them. Something in my chest tightened, but I swallowed it with a sip of water. When the plates were mostly empty and the boys were starting their second slices of pie, Eric stood up. He tapped his glass with a fork. The sound rang through the room with that thin, metallic arrogance I'd grown used to. Okay, he said. I just want to say a few words. Here it comes, I thought. Maybe he'll thank me. Maybe he'll remember whose hands raised him, fed him, clothed him. He cleared his throat. This year's been tough, he began. The business climate is insane, inflation is ridiculous, and we've had some setbacks. Some setbacks. That was one way to describe his gambling on risky startups and losing money faster than I'd made it in my first 10 working years. But through it all, he continued, placing a hand theatrically on Melissa's shoulder, this woman stood by me. She kept the house together, kept the kids on schedule, and she handled everything for Thanksgiving. He raised his glass to her. To Melissa, who did everything. Everyone clapped. My grandson's sticky hands smacked together. Melissa pretended to protest, dabbing at her eyes. Come on, she murmured. I sat very still. After a lifetime of lifting beams, carrying bricks, pushing wheelbarrows, I've learned that sometimes the heaviest thing you can lift is your head. So I lifted mine and looked at my son. His gaze slid past me the way rich people used to glide past me on sites where I poured their foundations. And hey, he added, with a chuckle that felt rehearsed, good thing this time it wasn't this poor guy cooking under pressure. Remember last time? Dry turkey, forgotten rolls? Laughter. Real laughter this time. From Melissa, from her sister, from her parents who'd joined us and barely spoken to me until now. Come on, Eric, I said quietly. I cooked everything. The room went silent for a heartbeat. Eric's smile faltered, then solidified into something harder. Dad, he said, Melissa did all the planning, okay? You just helped in the kitchen. Don't make it weird. Just helped. My grandson looked from his father to me, his cheeks flushed with second-hand shame that he didn't understand. I thought about the house I'd bought 3 years ago, the one everyone said was a terrible investment, the one I'd turned into a masterpiece, the one I'd planned to sign over to my only son as a Thanksgiving surprise. Poor guy, pauper, just helped. I felt the words settling in my bones like cold rain. I smiled. It was not a kind smile, though I kept it small. You're right, I said. No need to make anything weird. Exactly. Eric relaxed, believing he'd won something important. He had no idea that at that exact moment he lost, because that was when the idea came to me. If my own son saw me as a burden, as dead weight, as a poor fool to be mocked in front of guests, then the mansion I'd planned to give him needed a better heir. By Christmas, I promised myself, the gift deed would list only one name, and it would not be his. To understand how we got here, you need to know about the house. I spent 50 years in construction. Started as a kid carrying cement bags for men who swore more than they spoke. Ended as a project manager, the one everyone asked when a wall cracked or a roof sagged. I never became rich in the way Eric understands rich, but I made enough. I saved. I watched. If you spend long enough on building sites, you gain a sixth sense for land. You know which streets will be desirable in 10 years and which will be forgotten. You see which abandoned warehouses will become lofts with exposed brick and pretentious art. 3 years ago, I saw the old Harrington property for sale. Everyone in town knew it. Huge lot, overgrown trees, a crumbling brick mansion with a sagging porch and broken windows. Teenagers used it for parties. Parents used it as a threat. Do your homework, or you'll end up living in a place like that. The asking price was an insult to the land. "Dad, it's a money pit," Eric said when I showed him the listing. We were in his living room. He sat on his expensive leather sofa, scrolling through his phone while Noah built towers with plastic blocks on the floor. "It's solid," I said. "The bones are good. Brickwork like that you don't see anymore. The roof needs replacing, sure, and the wiring is from the Stone Age, but—" "Stone Age is right," he interrupted. "No one wants an antique mausoleum. People want open concept, modern, white walls, smart homes." I looked at him. My son who grew up watching me come home covered in dust, who knew how many nights we ate soup because a client delayed payment. "Eric," I said calmly, "they're building a new tech campus 2 miles from there. In 2 years, everyone will be begging to live close by. You could buy this. We fix it together and either you rent it or you sell it. It's a chance." He snorted. "My money is already working," he said. "Crypto, startups, real innovation. I'm not throwing it into a haunted house because you like the brick." "You asked me how to secure your boy's future," I reminded him. "This is how. Land, walls, a roof, not a digital token. For someone who never invested in anything bigger than tools, you suddenly know everything about finance?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have words, but because I knew they would be wasted. A week later, I bought the Harrington house myself. It was worse than it looked. Mold in the basement, rotten beams in the porch, windows that rattled when the wind sighed. But when I put my hand on the load-bearing walls, I felt that familiar stubborn strength. "Old girl," I whispered to the house, "they've all given up on you, but I haven't." For the first time since my wife died, I woke up excited. I worked there every day, calling in old favors from electricians, plumbers, roofers. I did most of the dirty work myself. My knees ached, my back screamed, but my soul, if you'll allow an old man the word, my soul felt alive. My neighbor Greg often stopped by. Greg lived next door to me in a modest, single-story house. Early 60s, retired firefighter, widower. We'd bonded over broken fences and shared lawn mowers. "You're crazy," he said the first time he saw the Harrington place, but in a good way. He brought coffee, sometimes sandwiches. On days when my hands shook from fatigue, he helped me pry up rotten floorboards, his breathing heavy but steady. "Why are you really doing this?" he asked once, as we sat on the cleared front steps, looking out at the yard that now resembled something other than a small jungle. "For Eric," I answered. "For the boys after him. They rent an overpriced house in a neighborhood that will be forgotten in 5 years. This will be something that grows in value, not just drains it." Greg nodded slowly. "Think he'll appreciate it?" I lied with a smile. "He's my son." The truth was more complicated. 2 years later, the Harrington house was no longer a joke. The local paper did a small feature on how an elderly builder resurrected a forgotten gem. Real estate agents called weekly, offering to find buyers. "You know this is worth at least $2 million now," one of them told me on the phone. "Maybe more if you wait another year." I stood in the restored dining room, my hand on the polished wooden table I'd found at an estate sale. Sunlight poured through the new windows, painting the floors with bright rectangles. "Maybe," I said, "but I'm not selling." I had a different plan. I would give the house to Eric and his family. A surprise. A final, significant gesture that would say what I couldn't seem to say with words anymore. "I love you. I believe in you. I forgive the thoughtless things you've said." I imagined the boys running through the halls. I imagined Melissa's face when she realized what it meant to live in a place like this. I even imagined Eric taking my advice seriously from then on. People say old men are dreamers. They're right. But dreams sometimes die loudly. The Thanksgiving insult didn't come out of nowhere. It was just the first time he said it clearly, in front of others. He called me old-fashioned when I questioned his investments. He called me overbearing when I asked why the boys never visited anymore. He called me dramatic when I said I was lonely. Once, when he thought I wasn't listening, he called me a broke builder who got lucky one time. One time. As if the decades of rent paid on time, the roof that never leaked over his childhood bedroom, the braces on his teeth, the college tuition. As if all of that sprang from luck. Still, I clung to the idea of the Thanksgiving surprise. In the week before the holiday, I went to see my lawyer, a careful man named Alvarez who had drawn up my will after my wife died. I want to gift the Harrington property to my son, I told him. But I want it done right, clean, no potential challenges later. He nodded, took notes, asked questions. We'll do a gift deed, he said. You'll sign, he'll accept. Once recorded, it's his. When can it be ready? If you sign today and your son signs when I meet him, we can submit it to be recorded next week. The effective date will be the date of delivery of the deed to him. I liked how Alvarez spoke. No unnecessary flourishes, just bricks of information laid in a straight line. Let's do it, I said. We prepared the documents. I signed my part. The blank for Eric's signature waited like a bridge not yet crossed. I imagined calling him after Thanksgiving dinner, asking him to come by the office to help me with some paperwork. I imagined his face when he realized what he was signing. Then came his speech. Good thing this time it wasn't this poor guy cooking. Poor guy. I remembered every overtime shift I took so he could have brand-name shoes in high school. I remembered how I'd sold my truck so he could have a decent car for college. I remembered how, when his first business collapsed, I mortgaged my paid-off house to help him start fresh. And now, in front of Melissa's rich parents, their perfect hair and quiet snobbery, my son pointed at me like I was a cautionary tale. Something in me shifted, not suddenly, not explosively, more like a final crack in a wall that had been under pressure for too long. I smiled through dessert. I praised Melissa's choice of table runner. I listened to talk of vacations and business trips and private schools. When the evening ended and I stepped out into the cold November air, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Eric walked me to my car. Dad, he said, don't take it personally, okay? You know how I joke. I looked at him. My boy, 43 years old, with a thinning hairline he pretended did not exist, with the same crease between his eyebrows his mother used to get when she worried. Is that what you think I am? I asked quietly. A joke? He shifted from foot to foot. Come on, Dad. Don't start. It was a good night. Melissa's parents finally saw we can host a proper holiday. Why make it dramatic? He didn't even realize what he'd just admitted. Proper holiday, I repeated, because you thanked them loudly. He sighed. You're sensitive lately. Maybe it's the age thing. Look, I'm under a lot of pressure right now. I can't walk on eggshells around you on top of everything else. Pressure? He rubbed his forehead. The business, the loans. Melissa's parents helped us secure some credit lines, but there are deadlines. I've got obligations, Dad, real ones. He hesitated, then added, but once this next deal pays off, things will look different. We'll be able to breathe. That was when he told me about the bridge loans he'd taken. High interest, short-term money from people who didn't wear suits or advertise on billboards. You owe how much? I asked, my voice low. He named a number that made my stomach clench. And you plan to pay it back with what? With the sale, he said. Of the property, the mansion. Once you... He caught himself, but it was too late. I stared at him. Once I what? He swallowed. Once you sign it over. You said you were thinking about, transferring it. It's logical, Dad. I'm your only child. When you're gone, it'll be mine anyway. Doing it now just helps everyone. I can clear the debt, move the family in somewhere better, and you'll know we're secure. That's what you want, right?" His words hung in the cold air. A complete plan built on an assumption that I, the poor guy, existed only as a stepping stone. "You already factored in the value of that house," I said slowly. "Of course," he answered. "It's not like you're going to live there. You don't need that much space. You barely use your current place." I looked back up at the house they rented. A nice enough place, but nothing like the Harrington mansion. Inside, I could see Melissa laughing with her parents. Her father wore a watch that cost more than my first car. "Do they know?" I asked. "Your lenders." "That it's basically mine already?" "Yeah, I mean, not officially, but they understand. Family assets. They're used to this. Used to sons counting on their father's properties to bail them out. Used to old men being invisible pieces on other people's chessboards." Eric clapped me on the shoulder. "Just hang in there, okay? Once the house is in my name and I close this deal, everything will calm down. You'll see. You'll be proud." I drove home in silence. The road lights passed over the windshield like slow, measured heartbeats. Luck, I thought, doesn't build houses. Nails do, sweat does, respect does, and disrespect can tear them down. The next morning I went back to Alvarez. He didn't expect to see me so soon. His eyebrows rose slightly when I walked in. "Mr. Lawson," he said, standing to greet me, "we were just preparing the file for your son." "Stop," I said. "We need to change it." He studied my face, then gestured for me to sit. "Tell me," he said simply. I told him about the dinner. Not every word, not every look, but enough. The pauper joke, the bragging about using the mansion to pay off dangerous loans, the complete absence of gratitude. "I was going to help him," I said. "Not just because he's my son. Because I thought if I did this, maybe he would look at me and see more than some old man cluttering up the holidays. But he doesn't see me at all. He sees a walking bank." Alvarez nodded, listening without interruption. "What exactly do you want to do now?" "I don't want the Harrington property going to him," I said quietly. "Not anymore. Not directly, not now. Maybe not ever." "Legally," Alvarez said, lacing his fingers together, "you haven't delivered the deed to him. He hasn't signed anything. The property is still 100% yours. We can void this draft and prepare a new one." "Good. Who should be the new grantee?" I thought of my neighbor, of the way he helped me tear out moldy insulation without asking for anything in return, of how he listened to me talk about beams and joists when everyone else changed the subject to profit margins and branding. "Greg Miller," I said. "My neighbor, friend. He's family more than others who happen to share my blood." Alvarez did not react. A good lawyer never shows surprise when a client rewrites their life. "Are you certain?" he asked. "Yes." He hesitated. "May I offer a suggestion?" "Go ahead." "We could structure this in a way that still allows you to retain some control while you're alive," he said. "A life estate, perhaps, or a trust. It would give you flexibility if circumstances change." "Circumstances already changed," I replied. "That's why I'm here. Just make sure that by Christmas the only name legally attached to that property besides mine is Greg's." He nodded. "As you wish." When I left his office, the air felt colder but cleaner, like I'd finally opened a window in a room full of stale smoke. On my way home, I stopped by Greg's place. He was on his porch tinkering with a broken garden hose. "You look like a man who just made a decision," he said without looking up. "I did," I answered, "and I need to talk to you about it." He glanced at me, then gestured to the chair beside him. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I said. "Everything." I told him about Thanksgiving. I repeated Eric's words. Poor guy. Pauper. Greg's jaw tightened. "I'd like to meet him someday," he said. "Just once." "No," I answered. "You don't." Then I told him about the property, about my original plan, about the deed waiting in Alvarez's office. "And now?" Greg asked quietly. "Now I'm changing it," I said. "Greg, I'm giving the Harrington house to you." He stared at me like he hadn't heard correctly. "What?" "You heard me?" "Lawson, are you out of your mind?" "Possibly," I said, "but not about this." He shook his head. "I can't accept that. It's your legacy. Your son—" "My son will inherit enough," I interrupted. "He still gets what's in my accounts, the small rental properties, whatever's left when I die. But this house—" I looked at Greg. "This house deserves someone who understands what it is. Someone who will walk through the halls and see work, not just dollar signs. Someone who has never once made me feel small." Greg swallowed. "You can't just do that because you're angry." "I'm not angry," I said. And I realized it was true. The anger had burned off, leaving something heavier and calmer behind. "I'm done being humiliated in spaces I paid for. That's different." He exhaled slowly. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll come to Alvarez's office next week," I replied. "Sign some papers. And think about whether you want to live in a mansion or rent it out and travel the world. I don't care which, as long as it isn't used to pay off Eric's debts to men who threaten him on the phone." His eyes widened. "It's that bad?" "Yes," I said. And he never thought to ask what it would cost me emotionally to fix it. He just assumed I would. He already spent my gift in his head. That's the part I can't forgive. Greg fell silent, staring at the street. A child rode a bicycle past us, shouting to a friend. Somewhere a dog barked. "All right," he said finally. "I'll go with you, but on one condition." "What?" "You move into that house with me for at least 6 months," he said. "If I'm going to live in a mansion, I'm not doing it alone. Someone has to show me which walls creak and which faucets misbehave." I laughed for the first time in days. "We'll scare the neighbors," I said. "2 old widowers in a castle." "Maybe they'll move my ex-wife's nephew away from across the street," he grumbled. "That boy plays music like a car alarm." We shook on it. The Harrington mansion had found its heir. The second hook of this story came 2 weeks later, in the form of a phone call that started with fake warmth and ended with veiled threats. "Dad," Eric said, his voice stretched thin, "we need to talk. It's urgent." I was in the Harrington house, stripping the last of the protective film from the new kitchen windows. The winter light poured in, pale and unforgiving. "I'm listening," I said. He hesitated. "Not on the phone. Can you come over tonight?" I thought of his Thanksgiving speech, of Melissa's narrowed eyes when I reminded him who actually cooked. "No," I answered. "If it's important, come here." He sounded surprised. "To the mansion?" "To my project," I corrected. "Yes." There was another pause. "All right," he said at last. "I'll be there in an hour." He arrived 40 minutes later, the sound of his car echoing in the empty driveway. He stepped out, looked up at the house, and for the first time since I'd bought it, I saw a real awe on his face. "Every time I see it, it looks different," he admitted. "Bigger." "It hasn't changed," I said. "You just look at it properly when you have problems." He winced a little, then forced a smile. "Can we go inside?" We walked through the front door. His footsteps echoed on the polished floorboards. "Place looks like it belongs in a movie," he said. "You did all this yourself?" "With help," I replied, "from people who respect their work." We stood in the foyer for a moment. The chandelier I'd restored hung above us, light scattering in a soft pattern over the walls. "So," I said, "what's urgent?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Dad, you know how I said things would look different once I closed this deal?" Yes. Well, the deal's delayed. Some regulatory nonsense. And the lenders? He trailed off. What about them? They're calling. A lot. They were fine at first, but the tone has changed. They want assurances. What kind of assurances? The kind that involve collateral, he admitted. Real collateral. They want something solid on paper. He glanced around the foyer. They know about this place, he added. I might have mentioned it. They're expecting the transfer to go through soon. And if it doesn't? He lowered his voice as if the walls themselves were listening. Then they start taking measures. Their words, not mine. And I can't. Melissa, the boys, the house, everything is tied up in this. If they move against us, we're ruined, Dad. He looked at me, and for a second I saw the child in him again. The boy who'd scraped his knee and run to me instead of his mother. You can fix this, he said. You sign the house over like we discussed. I pledge it, pay them off, and once the business stabilizes, we refinance everything properly. It's just a temporary shield. Temporary. Eric, I said quietly, do you remember the first house your mother and I rented? He frowned. Where is this going? It was small, I continued. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, drafty in winter. The landlord never fixed anything. I worked 3 jobs so we could move somewhere better. You used to sleep with your head against the wall because you said you could hear the pipes singing. I don't see how that's... In that drafty house, I said, I swore I'd never again let someone else's choices control the roof over my family's head. I worked, I saved, I learned. I bought our own house. I paid it off. Brick by brick. Do you understand what that meant to me? Dad, You've had security your whole life. I went on, my voice still calm but firmer now. You never went to bed wondering if the rent would be paid. You never heard your parents whisper about eviction. You grew up in a house we owned because I refused to gamble with our home. He shifted uncomfortably. I'm not gambling, he protested. I'm investing. It's different. You borrowed money from people who now threaten you, I said. And you used a house you don't own as part of your promise. That's not investing, Eric. That's betting with chips that aren't yours. He fell silent. The deed isn't in your name, I continued. It never was. It's still mine. Then sign it, he snapped. You're the one who made me believe you'd give it to me. I looked at him. You made yourself believe that, I said. I said I was considering. You turned that into a guarantee so you could impress people who don't care whether you end up on the street. His face darkened. So that's it? He demanded. You're going to sit in this empty palace while your son gets destroyed out there? Don't put this on me, I answered. You built this house of cards yourself. He stepped closer, anger flaring. You owe me, he said. The words were quiet, but they hit harder than his joke at Thanksgiving. Owe you? Yes, he insisted. You weren't there enough when I was a kid. You worked all the time. You missed games, school events. You were always tired. You think I don't remember Mom crying at the table because you weren't home again? You think providing money absolves you of everything? I let the accusations sit between us. They were not entirely false. I had missed games, recitals, evenings. I had said, I'll make it up to you, more times than I could count. You want to settle old scores? I said. All right, but let's not pretend this is about your childhood. This is about the fact that you saw me as a solution instead of a father. You're twisting things, he said. No, I replied. I'm finally untwisting them. He turned away, pacing under the chandelier. If you don't help me, they'll come after us, he muttered. Melissa will never forgive you. The boys don't call me unless someone reminds them, I said. They live in a world where I'm a figure in the background of photographs. They'll survive being angry at me. He stared at me with something like disbelief. You'd really let your own son fall? I'd really stop being your safety net, I said. There's a difference. I'm not throwing you off a cliff. I'm stepping away from the edge you walked to by yourself. His jaw clenched. You're heartless, he said. Maybe, I answered. Or maybe I'm finally tired. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen and paled. They're calling again, he whispered. Then answer, I said. He looked at me, then declined the call. This isn't over, he said, heading for the door. You'll regret this when something happens to us. When they take the house, the cars. When your grandsons have to move to some cheap apartment, maybe then you'll realize what you did. He slammed the door behind him. His threats echoed through the empty hall. I walked slowly to the dining room table and sat down. My hands trembled slightly, whether from age or emotion, I couldn't be sure. I pulled out my phone and called Alvarez. It's done? I asked. Yes, he replied. The new deed is signed and recorded. You are the life tenant. Greg Miller holds the remainder interest. Upon your passing, full ownership transfers to him automatically. Good, I said. And your son? He will find out at Christmas, I answered, along with everyone else. December crept in quietly that year. No big storms, no heavy snow, just a slow cooling of the air and the kind of gray skies that make the world feel smaller. Greg and I started moving things into the Harrington house in stages. A few boxes of books, tool sets, old photographs. He kept his own house for now, said he needed time to get used to the idea of living in a castle. You know he's going to explode, Greg said one evening as we assembled a bed frame in one of the upstairs bedrooms. Eric? Who else? He's already exploded, I replied. This will just be the part where he realizes the debris isn't landing where he thought it would. Greg shook his head. I've seen house fires where the owners reacted calmer than some adult children do when they find out they're not getting a property, he said. Prepare yourself. I am prepared, I told him. I've been preparing for 71 years. I still bought gifts for the boys. New books for Noah, a science kit for Liam. For Melissa, I chose a neutral scented candle and an expensive coffee blend I knew she liked. For Eric, I bought nothing. His gift was already decided. A week before Christmas, Eric called again. His voice was tired, stripped of the bravado he usually wrapped around himself like a suit of armor. The lenders gave me an extension, he said, until the end of January. After that, I understand, I said. We're still on for Christmas dinner, right? He asked. At our place. Melissa insisted. She says we need to keep family traditions. Family traditions. Yes, I said. I'll be there. Good, he replied, sounding genuinely relieved. Maybe we can talk then, calmly, about options. Christmas is not for negotiations, I said. We'll talk, but not about collateral. He sighed. Fine. See you then. On Christmas Day, I woke before dawn. Old habits. Work sites start early and my body had never quite learned to sleep in. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, looked at the photograph of my wife on the wall. I'm doing what you never could, I told her image. I'm saying no. Her eyes, frozen in pixels, gave no opinion. At noon, Greg and I drove by the Harrington house. He insisted on stopping to check the heating. In truth, I knew he just wanted to see it dressed in winter light. The wreath on the door, the bare branches scratching at the sky like lines on an old hand. You really think he'll understand someday? Greg asked. I watched the house, remembered every nail I'd hammered into it. I think understanding is not guaranteed, I said. Respect isn't either. Consequences, though. Those always arrive, Greg finished. We nodded like men who had watched gravity work all their lives. At 4, I arrived at Eric's rental. The driveway was crowded with cars. Melissa's parents' BMW, her sister's SUV, a couple I didn't recognize. Inside, the house smelled of catered food and expensive perfume. Christmas music played softly from hidden speakers. Dad, Melissa said when she saw me. "You're here. Good." Her tone suggested that my punctuality saved her from some logistical inconvenience. Eric appeared, wearing a sweater that probably cost more than my monthly utility bills. "Glad you came," he said. "Merry Christmas." He hugged me, a brief, awkward motion, more for the benefit of onlookers than either of us. "Merry Christmas," I replied. The boys ran in. Noah hugged me properly. Liam nodded without leaving his phone. I handed them their gifts. Their faces lit up, at least for a moment. Dinner was turkey again, though this time from a catering company. The gravy was too smooth, the potatoes too uniform. Everything tasted like it had been designed by a committee. Melissa's father talked about markets. Her mother talked about their upcoming holiday in Europe. No one asked how my back felt after moving half my belongings into a different house. At dessert, Eric cleared his throat. "Dad," he said, "do you want to say something? You usually do at Christmas." I looked around the table, faces familiar and distant at the same time. "Yes," I said, "I do." Conversations died away. The boys glanced up. Melissa tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, impatient but polite. "This year," I began, "I made an important decision. Some of you know about the property I bought a few years ago, the old Harrington house." "Oh, yes," Melissa's mother said. "Such a dramatic place. You turned it into a real gem." "Thank you," I said. "It took a lot of work. I bought it when everyone said I was foolish. I restored it when no one cared. I did it for reasons that, at the time, had to do with family." Eric shifted in his seat. "We all assumed," Melissa's father said, "that it's your retirement nest egg, a valuable one." "In a way," I replied, "it is, but not in the way you think." I took a breath. The room felt smaller, the air denser. "I've gifted the property," I said. "The deed has been signed and recorded. As of 2 weeks ago, the Harrington mansion is no longer mine to sell." Eric's eyes lit up. Melissa's hand flew to her mouth. Murmurs rippled around the table. "I knew it," Melissa whispered. "Eric, you see? I told you he would do the right thing." Eric looked at me, anticipation and relief fighting for space on his face. "So it's official?" he said. "I'm the owner?" I shook my head. "No," I answered. "You're not." Silence slammed into the room. "What?" he said, the word flat and ugly. "I gave it to Greg Miller," I said clearly. "My neighbor. My friend. If you've never watched someone's world crack without making a sound, let me tell you, it's almost worse than a scream." Eric's face drained of color. His mouth opened, then closed. Melissa's parents exchanged confused glances. "Who is Greg Miller?" her father asked. "A man," I answered, "who helped me carry beams when my hands shook, who brought me coffee on cold mornings, who never once called me a pauper in my own house." Melissa turned slowly to Eric. "You told me—" "You said it was as good as ours," she hissed. Eric stared at me. "Dad, tell them you're joking." "I'm not joking," I said. "Alvarez recorded the deed. I retain a life estate. I can live there as long as I breathe. After that, it's Greg's, not yours, not your lender's, Greg's." Eric stood up so fast his chair toppled. "You can't do that," he shouted. "I already did." His voice rose higher. "You knew I was counting on that property," he yelled. "You knew it was the only thing standing between me and those people. How could you do this to me?" "To you?" I repeated softly. "Eric, listen to yourself. That house was mine. I worked for it. I paid for it. I restored it. You turned it into a lifeline in your head without ever asking if I was willing to cut my own wrists so you could have it." Melissa's father cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss this calmly," he said. "Legal mechanisms can be reversed." "No," I interrupted. "They cannot. Not this one. Alvarez is thorough." Eric's hands trembled. "You're sentencing us," he said. You're sentencing your grandsons. Do you realize what will happen when the lenders find out there's no property? Yes, I said. I realize they will finally stop believing in imaginary collateral. They will see your situation as it is, not as you presented it. Melissa's voice cracked. You're older, she snapped. What do you even need with a huge house? Why cling to it out of spite? This isn't about the house, I replied. It's about respect. I will not hand over the largest thing I've ever built just so it can disappear into high-interest debt and arrogance. Eric pounded his fist on the table. Cups rattled. The boys flinched. You're getting senile, he shouted. That must be it. You're not thinking straight. No rational person would do this to their own child. His words stung, but only on the surface. A rational person, I said quietly, does not give his tools to someone who uses them to smash his own windows. Dad, please, he begged, the anger giving way to panic. We can fix this. Just go to your lawyer and change it back. Say you made a mistake. I didn't, I said. He stepped closer, leaning over me. For a second, I wondered if he might actually hit me. You owe me, he whispered again. For every time you weren't there. For every time Mom cried alone, you owe me. I looked up at him. I owed you a childhood with a roof over your head and food on your plate, I said. I paid that debt with interest. I owed you education, chances. I paid those too. What I do not owe you is a mansion you treat like a lottery prize. The boy stared at us, eyes wide. Dad, Noah whispered. I know, I told him gently. This is ugly. I'm sorry you have to see it, but sometimes truth and ugliness come together. Eric backed away, breathing hard. This will ruin me, he said. No, I answered. This will force you to face the fact that you ruined yourself. Melissa's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and blanched. It's them, she whispered. Eric, it's them. He looked at me one last time. You've chosen him over us, he said. That neighbor, that stranger. I chose the man who treated me like a human being, I said, over the man who treated me like a wallet. He grabbed his coat, shouted something to Melissa about needing to handle it, and stormed out. The front door slammed. Christmas music still played softly in the background. The absurdity of it made my chest ache. Melissa turned to me, eyes blazing. You destroyed my family, she said. I didn't sign any of your loan contracts, I replied. I didn't mock anyone at my own dinner table. I didn't spend money I didn't have. I didn't lie to lenders about assets. I didn't do any of those things. I simply refused to reward them. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The boys slipped away, into their rooms, out of sight. I stood up slowly. Thank you for dinner, I said to the room as a whole. The food was fine. I placed the small box with Melissa's candle and coffee on the table. This was for you, I added. You may keep it or throw it away. It makes no difference now. No one answered. I walked out into the cold night. The consequences came faster than I'd expected. 3 days after Christmas, Eric's car appeared in front of my small house. He didn't knock this time. He simply barged in, his face a mixture of desperation and fury. You need to come with me, he said. Now. Good afternoon, I replied, folding my newspaper. To what do I owe this unannounced visit? They know, he said. The lenders. They went to the county office. They found out the mansion is not in my name. Of course they did, I said. That's what serious lenders do before extending large credit lines. They check records. These are not serious lenders in the way you think, he snapped. They're furious. They want their money. They don't care how. And you want me to care for them, I concluded. I want you to fix this, he said. You can still offer the house as collateral. You're the owner for now. Sign it over, get them off my back, then we figure out the rest. I shook my head. No. His voice rose again. They will come after me, he shouted. After Melissa. After the boys. Do you want that on your conscience? You put them in this position, I said. Not me. If they come, you call the police. You file complaints. You face what you chose. I will not surrender the work of my life to men who knock at midnight and remind you of interest rates. You'd let them hurt your grandchildren? No, I replied calmly. I would not let them hurt my house. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You're insane, he whispered. Perhaps, I said. Or perhaps I understand something you never learned. You cannot build a solid life on shaky ground and expect someone else to reinforce it forever. He turned away, ran his hands through his hair. I have 30 days, he said. 30. After that, court, repossessions, everything. Melissa will leave me. The boys will hate you. Is that what you want? I didn't want any of this, I answered. I wanted a son who saw me. I wanted holidays without insults. I wanted to hand you something with pride, not fear. But here we are. He laughed harshly. Oh, so this is about your feelings, he said. Not our survival. Yes, I said. For once it is. He shook his head. You know what? He said. When they take everything, when we're sitting in some cheap apartment and the boys ask why they lost their home, I will tell them. I will tell them their grandfather chose a stranger over them. You tell them whatever helps you sleep, I replied. I will sleep in a house I built with my own hands, with a man who never used my love as collateral. He stormed out. I watched his car disappear, then sank into my old armchair. My knees hurt, my chest ached, but beneath the discomfort, there was a strange, quiet steadiness. I had not fixed his problem. For the first time in his life, he would have to. In January, the calls started coming, not from the lenders, from Melissa. At first they were angry. Voicemails full of accusations, tears, threats. You've destroyed us. You'll die alone in that empty mansion. You'll regret this when you're sick and no one comes. I listened to each message once, then deleted it. After the anger came the pleas. Please, think of the kids. Maybe you can sign part of the house, just enough to... Eric is not sleeping. He's losing weight. Is that what you wanted? No, I thought, each time. This is not what I wanted. But it is what you all chose when you decided my worth was measured only in square footage and bank balances. Greg moved into the Harrington house in February. We left my old house mostly intact for now, a place for overflow furniture and memories. It still feels wrong, he said once as we stood on the balcony overlooking the yard. Like I stole something. You didn't steal anything, I replied. It was given. I know, but your son... My son will learn that actions have endings, I said. Children's stories end with happily ever after. Real ones end with, and then he lived with the consequences. In March, Eric's house went on the market. Officially, it was for strategic downsizing. Unofficially, the selling agent told me quietly when we ran into each other at the grocery store, it was to pay off what could be paid. They're lucky the lenders took some of the cars instead of making more trouble, he said. Lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt tired. One rainy afternoon, there was a knock on the door of the Harrington mansion. I opened it to find Liam and Noah standing there, damp and shivering slightly. Dad dropped us off, Liam said. He said we should see where you live now. Did he? I murmured. Yeah, Liam added. He said, go visit the mansion your grandfather chose over you. Noah looked at me, eyes wide. Did you? He asked. Choose the house over us? His question cut deeper than anything Eric had thrown at me. Come in, I said softly. We're not having this conversation on the porch. They stepped inside, staring at the high ceilings, the polished wood, the paintings I'd hung with Greg's help. "It's like a hotel," Noah whispered. "It's like something from a movie," Liam added, trying to sound unimpressed and failing. I led them to the kitchen. Greg had left a pot of soup on the stove. The smell of onions and herbs filled the air. "You hungry?" I asked. They nodded. As they ate, I told them the story. Not every adult detail, not about lenders who visited at odd hours or contracts written in vague threats, but enough. "I bought this house," I said. "I fixed it. I planned to give it to your father. I really did. But before I could, he made it clear he didn't see me as a person anymore. He saw me as a solution to his problems." Liam frowned. "Because he owes money?" "Yes," I answered. "He borrowed more than he could handle. He assumed I would cover the difference. He assumed this house was already his, even though I never gave it." "Why didn't you then?" Noah asked. "You said you were going to." "Because sometimes," I said slowly, "when you give someone something too big while they're not ready, you don't help them. You crush them. You make them think consequences don't exist. I've been fixing your father's mistakes for years. This time, I chose not to." Liam's spoon clinked against the bowl. "Dad said you don't love us," he muttered. "Because if you did, you'd help him." I felt the words like a blow. "Do you feel loved when your father is always angry, always worried, always talking about debts?" I asked. They exchanged a glance. "He yells a lot," Noah admitted. "He's stressed," Liam added defensively. "I know," I said, "and I'm sorry. I truly am. But understand this. Love is not always giving what people ask for. Sometimes it's refusing to give what will make everything worse." "So you chose the house," Liam insisted. "No," I replied. "I chose myself, for the first time." They didn't fully understand. How could they? They were children in a story written by adults. When their bowls were empty, I showed them the rest of the house. The library with its tall shelves, the bedrooms with their wide windows, the attic I'd turned into a small workshop. "Will we ever live here?" Noah asked. I hesitated. "I don't know," I said truthfully. "Right now it belongs to me and Greg. When I'm gone, it will belong to Greg. After that, who knows? The world changes in ways we can't predict." "Dad said you erased us," Liam murmured. "I erased no one," I said quietly. "I just refused to write the ending he expected." When Eric came to pick them up, he didn't step inside. He waited at the gate, arms crossed. "How was the palace?" he asked the boys. "Cool," Noah said. "Grandpa showed us everything." "Of course he did," Eric muttered. Then he looked at me. "You think this makes you noble," he said. "It doesn't. It just makes you alone." "I'm not alone," I answered. "I have Greg. I have this house. And I still have you. If you ever look at me and see more than a poor man in a borrowed seat." He scoffed and turned away. You probably expect me to say that over time he understood. That one day he came with flowers, apologized, and we all sat around a table sharing stories about how much we'd learned. Life rarely follows the path of cheap dramas. Months turned into a year. Eric's situation stabilized somewhat. They moved into a smaller place. He took a job rather than calling himself a visionary entrepreneur. Melissa cut back on luxuries. The boys adapted as children do, resilient in the face of adult failures. Our relationship did not magically heal. He called on birthdays. On Father's Day, he sent a generic card with a printed message. Some holidays we saw each other, some we didn't. But something had changed in the way he spoke to me. He no longer joked about my supposed poverty in front of others. He no longer called me only when he needed something. He kept a distance, yes, but a distance without constant contempt. One afternoon, 2 years after that Christmas, he came to the Harrington mansion alone. He looked older, not just from time, but from life hitting him harder than he was used to. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. We sat at the same dining room table I'd once imagined giving him. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, indifferent ghosts. "I still think about that night," he said. "So do I replied. "I hated you," he admitted. "More than I've ever hated anyone. You know that?" "I assumed," I said. He rubbed his hands together. "When they came for the cars, when we had to tell the boys we were moving, I wanted to blame you for all of it," he said. "And I did, for a long time. It was easier than looking in the mirror." "What changed?" I asked. "I got a job," he said with a grim smile. "A real one, 9 to 5, answering to someone, getting a paycheck that had nothing to do with vision or potential, just hours worked, tasks completed." It humbled me. I nodded. "I realized," he went on, "that what you did, giving that house to Greg, it forced me to stop pretending I was a genius and accept that I'd been reckless. If you'd bailed me out again, I would have kept going. Bigger loans, bigger risks. Eventually, there'd be nothing left for anyone." He looked up at me. "I'm not saying I forgive you completely," he said. "I'm not there yet, but I understand more now." "For an old man, that's as close to an apology as I'm likely to get," I said gently. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "I'm sorry," he said, surprising himself as much as me. "For calling you a pauper, for treating you like a bank, for forgetting that all this," he gestured around at the house, "came from your hands, not from some lottery win." I let the words sink in. "Thank you," I said. "That matters." He hesitated. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Giving it to Greg instead of me?" I looked around, at the walls I'd painted, the floors I'd polished, the photographs Greg had hung of his own grandchildren, mixed now with mine. "No," I said. "I regret that I had to, but I don't regret that I did." He nodded slowly. The distance between us did not vanish, but it changed shape. It became something we could at least see clearly, instead of pretending it wasn't there. On my 75th birthday, the whole family came to the Harrington mansion. Melissa, still cautious around me, but no longer openly hostile. The boys, now teenagers, taller than me, louder. Eric, quieter than before, but present. Greg sat at the far end of the table, raising a glass. "To Lawson," he said, "the only man I know who builds houses and boundaries with the same stubborn determination." Everyone laughed, even Eric. When cake was served and candles blown out, Noah leaned toward me. "Grandpa," he asked, "who will the house belong to after Greg?" I smiled. "That," I said, "is a story for another day. Maybe your story. Maybe someone else's. For now, let's just live in it." Because in the end, this revenge of mine wasn't about taking something from my son. It was about taking myself back. I had spent decades pouring concrete and love into other people's foundations while letting my own crack in silence. The day my son called me a pauper and thanked his wife for doing everything in a dining room filled with my food, my labor, my sacrifice, something finally shifted. I chose to give my greatest work to someone who saw me, and I chose to let my son feel, for the first time, the weight of a life built, or ruined, by his own hands. I closed my eyes that night in the Harrington mansion, not as a poor man, not as a beggar at anyone's table, but as a builder who had finally learned that the strongest walls are the ones you raise around your own dignity.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales stories like this, hit subscribe.